Happy Tuesday, everybody. It is May 28th, a little different sound and a little different scene here today. And from my perspective, if you're listening to it on the podcast, it's not going to maybe be any different, but trying to change some things up around here. So we'll get back to normal next week. Alongside me, as always, he's Intern Joe. I'm Mike. You appreciate you guys tuning in today. A lot going on in the world of Gamecock athletics, as it typically is at this time of the year. And that's a good thing. That means baseball's in action. They're going to be heading on over to Raleigh later this week, regional play. And then from a football standpoint, which we always talk here on Tuesdays, recruiting is really going to start to crank up over these next couple of weeks. If you go back, since Shane Beamer has arrived, especially these last couple of recruiting classes for him, once they get to the month of June, that is when things have really picked up for the Gamecocks. So head on over, sign up today. Gamecock Central, just $1 for your first month. You can't beat it because, again, you get everything with baseball. You get everything with basketball. Transfer portal, South Carolina's been picking up some players these last couple of weeks. You get all the insider information. Wes Mitchell, our colleague, he just wrote a phenomenal story today that you want to go check out if you want to know what's going on with basketball, about one of the newest additions to Gamecock Hoops, EJ Walker. Go check that out, but you'll also get everything you need to know from a football standpoint as well. We've been breaking down a lot of things, whether it be positional rooms, whether it be freshmen to keep an eye on. You get all of that, $1 for your first month on Gamecock Central. Having said all that, Joe, where I want to go with today's show is when you look ahead, because now we are less than 100 days away. We are less than 100 days away until football kicks off, week one, a little bit earlier this year, August 31st, Williams-Brice Stadium against Old Dominion. I dropped a story today on Gamecock Central, and I shared something I've been doing the last couple of years. I shared my thoughts on where I see this team as far as the expectations for wins. Now, Vegas, they have them at 5.5. Vegas has been wrong, as we know in the past. Vegas sometimes is right. So having said all that, again, I put my story out. I'll share my thoughts in a little bit, but I'm going to open the floor up to you first. Ballpark. To me, I gave two numbers. So you don't have to give me one hard number if you're not sold on that quite yet. And then just give me your reasoning.
Yeah, Mike, I'll give you two, and I'll try to stick to two because, again, I'm notorious for giving a bunch of answers when asked for a few of them. But no, I think the ceiling for this team is probably 8 wins. I think that's about as high as they can go.
Would you include that as a bowl win too, or regular season when you say 8 wins?
See, that's a different question. Yeah, I guess 8 wins with the bowl win. I'll go out that far to say I don't know. I think 7 wins, 6 win season is reasonable. Those are my two numbers, and then I think you can tally on a bowl win as well. And we're gonna go through it. My number's probably gonna change, and I think I might give you by the end of it 8 with the bowl win, 9, but I don't know. We'll see. But 7 wins regular season, 6 wins. I think it's within that ballpark for sure.
I'm going to give you a number here, Joe, that you might not be aware of. 13. There's been over 100 years of Gamecock football. It's only happened 13 times that South Carolina has won 8 games or more in the regular season. So, and obviously a big portion of those came during one of the best runs, not just one of the best run in program history, 2010 through 2013. So, I bring that up simply to say that, it's tricky to get to that mark. But having said all that, I think the big thing is for me, when we look at this year's team, here's what's tricky. I understand naturally people want to look at the schedule and they're going to say, well, it's going to be tough. It's tough every freaking year. And it's only going to get tougher, right? For 2 reasons. The conference itself is getting tougher because you just added in Oklahoma and Texas. You have to play Oklahoma this year. You got to go play Oklahoma again next year too. But on top of that, you play a rivalry game to end the regular season against a team who has always been there the last couple of years, the last decade or so. That's a great game. So you don't have the luxury of having some of these cupcake games, if you will. Old Dominion week 1, and as I wrote in my piece today, you should beat that team. But it's week 1. Like, I don't know what we're going to see from this offense. And this isn't Mike saying, okay, South Carolina is going to lose to Old Dominion week 1. But the point being is, when you look at this team, we could easily look at some of these games, and I'm sure a lot of us, we play the game, right? Win, loss, win. You just go down the list. I get that. But with this offense, there's so many unknowns. There's so many unknowns. And if this defense is as good as we think it can be, right? No one's saying it's going to be the 86 friggin' Bears. I know you always love when I say that, Joe. No one's saying that's what the defense is going to look like necessarily. Doesn't have to be that. But how much weight will the defense have to carry, especially early on in the year? I think that's the biggest question, because from an offensive standpoint, they have playmakers. They have playmakers. Norris Sellers could have a phenomenal season. Phenomenal season. The amount of talent they have in that running back room, it could be special. That offensive line, there's more depth. Wide receivers, you have talent, but who's going to be those top 6 guys? So I bring these things up simply to point out the fact that, look, we could say this about any team any year, but I feel like with this year's team more than anything, when you look at Vegas putting that number at 5.5, it makes sense simply because, bro, you look at it, tough schedule, a lot of unknowns on offense. But again, you could say this with any team. If they're able to figure those things out, I think this defense is good enough to get them to a point where it could be over than some of the numbers we're saying. So for me, where I am right now, and these things can change, I have them between 6 and 7 wins. I have between 6 and 7 wins. Yeah. And I think the main reason why is because, and I don't need to tell Gamecock fans this, you guys already know this, but I mean, I'm going on year 9 covering the Gamecocks and year 10 of covering the SEC. As soon as you feel like you know this team, that's when things go the complete opposite way, whether that be good, whether that be bad. So I simply say that to say this team heading into the year, yeah, maybe 6 wins, 7 wins. Would I be shocked if they exceed that? And I'm not going crazy here, 9 wins, but would I be shocked if they exceed that? No. Would I be shocked if it goes the other way? No. Because again, for the reasons that we talked about, Joe, tough schedule, a lot of unknowns on offense. I think those 2 things are obviously the big things that you look at when you try to figure out what the win total will be this year, at least during talking season right now. And that's what we have for the next couple months. So, if you don't enjoy the conversation, keep it moving. I mean, welcome to talking season. But I think those 2 things. And then again, defensively, I think this defense can help them out. Look, a couple of years ago, special teams bailed them out in a couple games. Special teams, shoot, there are multiple games where special teams won them games. And I feel like from a defensive standpoint, that's what's going to have to happen this year if you want to see some type of magic that was similar to that a couple of years back.
Yeah, absolutely. Michael, you threw a lot at me there. I'm going to start with the defense first. I think the defense, I mean, the way that people are talking about this defense, I mean, there's potential for it to look somewhat similar to the 85 Bears. I mean, they have, all of the pieces that they need. And again, knock on wood here, we do it a lot on these shows. But again, I think it's something that is worth looking forward to, because you restocked your whole defense. You looked the part on the defensive line. You've got some depth there. I mean, it was the whole thing. Boogie Huntley and Tonka Hemingway were asking for all year was, just some help. And so they got it. And then you also have some elite edge rushers, Dylan Stewart, obviously in the mix. And then you factor in, the position coaches too. You've got Sterling Lucas and you've got Travion Robertson, which is, I mean, 2 guys that you need in the trenches, coaching your guys up to be just dogs, animals, rushing the passer, stopping the run. So it's certainly attractive. The defense is certainly the more attractive part of this football team. And then also, too, I think the offense just it's going to need some time to develop, right? Because, again, it's developing now. They're getting their people in their spots and whatever, and finding out who their starters are. But I mean, once they hit game time, it's going to take a couple games. There's going to be growing pains with everything as it is, football and life in the SEC. But again, I think it's going to be interesting to see how far this defense can kind of carry while this offense develops, I don't think, knowing Dowell Loggins' offense, it's not going to take very long for them to, start doing what they want to do. It's just a matter of getting that all in sync, I think. So, I mean, 7 to 6 or 6 to 7 wins is probably the total that we're looking at. I mean, the comments are talking about, if Shane doesn't get to 6 and 6, and I know that's a different conversation for a different day because it's a whole different can of worms.
And I think the majority of the fan base understands this. I think there's a portion of the fan base that wants to believe that if Shane, even if they get to 6 and 6, and I think someone threw that out there. So Monberry, I'm not specifically pointing you out. I think I just saw a comment from you, but if it's under that mark, unless the wheels fall completely off, Shane's gonna be fine. Shane's gonna be fine. I mean, look what they just did from a recruiting class standpoint. I mean, you brought in 2 5-stars for crying out loud. That's never happened in program history. There's things going on right now, and you look at what they've been able to do from a recruiting standpoint, especially this past cycle. And when we talk about recruiting, it's not just talking about high school players. Bringing in 20 new players via the transfer portal. Yep. And yes, obviously 20 plus left, and you brought some of those players in to replace. But if you've been paying attention on 3, we give you the grade in terms of, okay, the guys that left compared to the guys that came in and the talent that they've been able to bring in. I mean, you look at rooms like the running back room, you look at rooms like the linebacker room, some of these rooms that even towards the end of last season, never mind the off season, when you had guys like Stone Blanton and Pup Howard enter the transfer portal, but you got to a point where you're wondering, okay, what are these rooms going to look like? Like, all right, running back room. Okay. Yeah. Okay. At the time, all right, Mario Anderson will be back. That's good. All right, they're bringing in Matthew Fuller. Okay, but it is night and day different now. Night and day different in that running back room. Night and day different in the linebacker room. And when you look at it from a depth standpoint, I wrote a story the other day. Bam, Martin Scott, I think he is certainly one of those players you have to keep an eye on this year. I think he's going to have a massive season. The majority of his tackles, I think it was like 28 of his 38, something like that, to close out the end of the year, came in like in the last 3 or 4 games. He started 3 games last year, appeared in 10. He's the type of player that not only will benefit with obviously guys like Stone Blanton and Pup Howard being gone, even though I feel like he'll be a guy that's coming off the edge more than anything. But the point being is they have guys now to be able to rotate in there to be able to keep his legs fresh. So it's not just, okay, what can a player do from a talent standpoint? It's being able to add that depth so you can keep those legs fresh. We've talked about with the D-line, at tackle, at edge, outside linebacker, of course. It's another position, though. That's why I'm mentioning him. So I think what they've been able to do is exactly what you need to do in this era. Now, and I get it. I see what people saying, to be fair, Mike Muschamp brought in 3 5-stars. It feels different. It feels different. There's difference.
It's a lot different.
We've had Marcus Lattimore on the show to talk about it. Just the difference between that era and again, there were the number of players that they put in the league. There's no question that they brought in talent, but there's a difference between bringing in talent and being able to get them to work together. So, look, if some people are upset with Beamer, have at it. I've been doing this for 9 years, going on 9 years. I get it. I get the cycle. I get we're getting to that point now where people are getting upset about stuff. And don't get me wrong. Like at some point, but at the same time too, and here's the part that pisses off a lot of people. You got to realize the realization when you look in the mirror who you are. All right. The standard for South Carolina in comparison to some other schools, it's going to be different. And I know some fans don't want to hear that. And I'm not saying you should accept mediocrity, but there's a difference. You don't want to be going every 4 or 5 years.
The program is just in a different spot, Mike.
You can't do that. You keep going in, bringing a new coach in every 4 or 5 years. Guess what? You're going to be in the same spot of just trying to be able to tread water, never mind trying to climb up the ladder. So some schools will be able to do that. And again, that's not to say South Carolina won't make a move if this thing continues to head in the opposite direction. But to answer the bigger question, unless the wheels fall off completely this year, Joe, I think he's going to be fine.
Yeah, Mike, it's a development thing, right? So Shane has been known, and that's part of the thing too, is like I'll start with this, is like you can't not give a coach who's been preaching development, already developed. I mean, you saw the development of, Xavier Leggett and Cam Smith, a lot of those guys. And I know Cam Smith was a Muschamp guy, but the development of players here has been really good under Shane Beamer so far, right? And so it would be stupid or naive not to think that, if you can him at this point, it would essentially stunt the development. So I think unless the wheels fall completely off, and also the program's in a different spot too. Like you're not coming off of the Steve Spurrier era anymore, where you were at the top, right? You have to trust a guy to develop it, right? Because you're not coming, like Muschamp was brought in, I feel like, to get back to where Spurrier was. But now the expectation is you're fighting upwards. It's an uphill battle, and so it's in a different spot. I think it would be a little naive to can a coach this quick when you're sitting where you are in the SEC in the hierarchy.
This team, Shane Beamer, they arrived a hell of a lot earlier. This program getting turned around
absolutely.
Quickly. They have the type of season last year, and naturally, there's going to be some people that are pissed off. It's just like, again, this isn't playing. Wait a couple more months. Your NCAA video game's going to be coming out.
That's in the transfer
portal,
right?
Your coaches that's on there every 3-4 years if you want. Yeah.
Yeah, the portal, I mean, recruiting in the portal is huge in today's day and age, and he's been able to do it, and he's been able to do it the right way. I mean, the quality of guys that he's bringing in has been, pretty good for the most part, right? So, again, the portal is a whole different ballgame. I think you got to recruit in the portal. I mean, look at Dabo, right? I mean, he's, that was my 2 cents. I didn't mean to, but yeah.
No, I mean, again, I'm not going to have – I just shared my thoughts on it.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Yeah, I agree.
The point is we're not going to have to worry about that unless the wheels fall off. Basically, just wanted to answer people's questions about it. It's not happening. So if you want to be one of those people, have at it. There's a million spots on the message board where you can share your thoughts. You're not alone. Go right up there with baseball and every other sport. I mean, it happens. It's the circle of life. Lamont Paris has a bad year this year. Watch how some people.
No, I know exactly. That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Having said all that, Joe, said all that, I mentioned Bam Martin Scott. We've talked about a couple players on the defensive side, Brian Thomas Jr. being another one.
Yeah, Brian.
Is there anyone that you're looking at saying, man, keep an eye on him this year from a defensive standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, I think Kyle Kennard's the attractive one from a transfer portal standpoint. And then, I mean, defensive line, I think the productivity of Boogie Huntley and Tonka Hemingway is going to go up because, again, I mentioned it. I think it was one of the biggest moves of the offseason for this team was just getting depth at the defensive tackle position, right? Boogie and Tonka aren't going to have to be relied on to make every single play in the trenches now. Now you have some other big men that can kind of get in there, hockey shifts like Sterling Lucas was telling us. So I think, obviously there's 2 established names on this squad and in this program, but I expect their productivity to go up. And then obviously, I mean, Debo Williams, it's another name that, he's playing linebacker too. You brought up Bam Martin Scott. I think that's another, really good one. So I think, to pivot over to the linebacker. But yeah, defensive tackles, I expect a lot more production out of. I think it's going to be really good up front and in the trenches.
I think Bengali, when you look at what South Carolina could do, right? I think based on, don't forget Mo Kaba.
Mo Kaba, absolutely.
Back. But when you think of, okay, you're starting middle linebacker, and the other thing too is, look, they're going to be playing a lot of 3 linebacker sets, it feels like. We're doing a 3-3-5. They'll be doing some 4-2-5s out there as well, but they'll be doing some 3-3-5 action. So I bring that up because when you think about, okay, middle linebacker, or at least from a 4-2-5 standpoint, Debo Williams. Then next to him, I have Bam Martin Scott.
I agree.
Now, obviously, if you're out there and you have a 3 linebacker set, there's going to be an additional linebacker out there so more guys can be able to play. Having said that, just looking at it with 2 linebackers, I think with Martin Scott, I think Bengali's perfect to be able to play right behind him, because when you look at the skill set, when you look at what both players are capable of doing, I think they're going to be able, yin and yang, they're going to be able to work off and play off each other nicely. And then with Demetrius Knight, he's someone that I can see playing behind Debo. But again, depending on the personnel that they use from a defensive standpoint, 4-2-5, 3-3-5, whatever the case may be, I also see Knight out there. And I think we're continuing to see different looks as far as which linebackers they're using. And that's not to say that Knight can't move around, but depending on down and distance, depending on the situation, you hear it up front, the NASCAR look. Sometimes you have some of those guys at edge that can play D tackle to be able to put more pressure on. I think South Carolina is going to get real creative with this. They definitely found something towards the end of the season with it. And when you look at a guy like Bam in particular, he was someone that really thrived. He really thrived in that system. So can you be able to replicate that? Obviously, that's the $1 million question. But on top of that, if you're able to have other players be able to do that as well, I mean, man, you're going to be able to have some fresh legs at linebacker, which is the complete opposite of what we were saying a year ago, especially towards the end of the season. I mean, you look at the majority of the season, especially after Mo Kaba got hurt, Stone Blanton, even with a bum ankle, he had to play a ton of snaps.
Yeah.
Debo Williams had to play nearly every snap. I think there were games that both linebackers played practically every snap, if not all of them. So to be able to have fresh legs out there at linebacker, are you kidding me? Could be a game changer this year for him. Never mind what's going on in that edge row.
Yeah, no, again, and Bam is a perfect fit, right? Because I mean, Debo's kind of your do-it-all linebacker, and then Bam just possesses athleticism. He's traditional too, kind of in the prototype, same realm of Debo Williams. So again, I think he's a good fit, Mike. It was a really good one, for this defense in terms of, I guess, despite the defensive line, I think out of the linebackers, I think Bam is going to have a breakthrough year. So I like it, and then also too, to last year's point, like I think. Part of the reason, I mean, you lost all your linebacker depth, in that season. And that was part of the problem of why, the defense was having as rough a time as they were. But then also when you have, again, that fully restocked pass rush, you can do a lot more things on defense and provide a lot more different looks. So I think Clayton White's going to have a great time, drawing up this defense with the depth of defensive tackle that he has. He can do some crazy stuff with his linebackers and then also DB. So it's going to be interesting to see. And again, we do it a lot here, but knock on wood that nothing goes south again.
I'll make a quick comment because Craig shared Fred Johnson.
Yeah,
I'm interested to see what the plan is with Fred. It's easy for me to say this right now because he's not on campus, right? We haven't been able to see him run around yet. I think when you look at what's in that room right now, and you look at from a scholarship standpoint, the number of fifth-year guys, just the veteran presence in that room, some of the players that they were able to acquire via the transfer portal. If everyone's able to stay healthy and you're able to get something out of Mo Kaba, would it be the worst thing in the world not to have to burn a year of eligibility for Fred? And he's able to get in there, get faster, get stronger, get bigger, all that stuff, right? Combine that with the fact that you're bringing in a guy like Wendell Gregory.
Yeah.
So,
dog.
I think what needs to be just reiterated, especially in this era, yes, there are going to be players, regardless of the position, there'll be players that don't want to do that. They're not going to want to sit and wait and trust the process or whatever way you want to phrase it. However, not every player is going to be able to come in and be like a Luedecke Babalade or a Big Tree. And shoot, for those guys, it took unique situations and circumstances for them to get in there. The fact that South Carolina's offensive line was just banged up, you played over a dozen guys on the O-line last year. Now, certainly those two guys stepped up and did some good things, and we've seen what South Carolina has done on the defensive side of the ball the last couple of years. You think of a guy like DQ Smith his freshman year. Think of a guy like Kilgore last year. You think of a guy like Nick Eamon-Worry. So they've been able to produce some talented players right away as freshmen, but not every player will be like that. I think one player to keep an eye on, Joe, who could be that player defensively is Jalewis Solomon. I'm interested to see how they use him because, look, I loved what Vakari Swain did in that spring game, and I've mentioned this before. I still would give the edge, at least as of today, heading into fall camp, still give the edge to Judge Collier to be that other starting corner across from Odie Fortune. But I think what we saw with Bakari Swain, he proved, all right, I can hold my own. The interesting thing, though, about Jalewis Solomon, true freshman that's going to be arriving on campus this week, is he's so lengthy. He's also someone from his high school tape, obviously making the jump up, so you got to prove it at the college level, but he's a ball hawk. Comes up,
Yeah.
loves to tackle, physical guy. The interesting thing to me is this. If he can learn not just playing corner at this level, but making an impact at nickel, even though I would give John Kilgore the advantage to be the starting nickel heading into the year. Now you're talking about a guy that gives you depth at multiple positions on defense. You're talking about making the travel squad as a freshman outside of special teams. How do you do it? Versatility, being able to play multiple positions. So to me, when we look at it from a freshman standpoint, outside of the obvious, Dylan Stewart, that's the player I'm keeping an eye on defensively as a true freshman.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think he's going to be one of Torian Gray's next great defensive backs that's going to make South Carolina alums proud and playing on Sundays potentially. So, yeah, Jalewis Solomon's a dog. And it's going to be fun to watch because, again, we talk about it all the time, especially on this show, that competition increases rooms. It's so pivotal to have young dogs. Look at the wide receiver room, Mazeo Bennett. That kid loves to compete, and he's making that wide receiver room better. Will we see Mazeo Bennett a lot? I'm not sure. I think we'll see. I think we'll see him in spots. He'll certainly get his chances, but the value that he is to that room, especially as a freshman that's hungry, ready to compete, is so valuable. It goes so far.
Speaking about going far, I'm going to hit some ad reads. If you guys are looking to purchase a home and you're trying to find someone that can help you go the extra mile, give our guy Clint Hammond a call. That's what Wes Mitchell did. That's what former Gamecock quarterback and captain Perry Orth did as well. When he was looking for a home, they gave Clint a call, trying to find the lowest rate on the market. Not necessarily easy over these last 2 years, but Clint and his team do an outstanding job. That's why they've been a longtime supporter of Gamecock Central and GC. They've been able to help out so many people throughout the state of South Carolina. Give them a call, 803-422-6797. Once again, that is Clint Hammond of Movement Mortgage.
Yeah, our next sponsor of the day is Andy Luedecke of My Perfect Franchise. Give our guy Andy a call, 404-973-9901. Find your perfect franchise at myperfectfranchise.net. He's the owner. He's our guy. Give him a call. Once again, 404-973-9901. And you can also contact him at Andy at myperfectfranchise.net. Give him a call or an email for all of your franchising needs.
Yeah, if you're in the process of trying to invest some money, maybe you want to get into franchising, give Andy a call. He can be able to match you up. It's a free consultation that first go around. He'll be able to match you up. Maybe you have some money, but you're trying to figure out, all right, what would make the most sense for me? He walks you through everything. He makes that process much easier. Definitely something, if you're interested in doing, Andy has proven to be the guy to call. All right, Christopher Adams asked, we'll wrap up things up in a little bit, doing a shorter show today on this Talking Tuesday. Christopher Adams says, Mike, what games on the schedule this year do you think are key games this season? Well, let's pop up the schedule real quick, shall we?
I got 2 of them in mind.
I have the schedule right here. So here's the schedule. Okay, here's the schedule. And we'll slide this sucker up. Here we go. So I think the Kentucky game week 2, it goes without saying for multiple reasons. One, it's your first SEC game. But 2, you're on the road week 2. And we all assume that it's going to be Lenore Sellers being the starting quarterback. How does he look in his first SEC game? Yes, we've seen him get in garbage time, and he's done some great things. And I think he's going to do very well this season. If there are some hiccups early on because he's a freshman, a redshirt freshman, so a year two guy. Okay. But as we all know, when you're talking about growing pains for a player versus growing pains for a team, you don't have that luxury always of being able to bounce back if you're dropping games early on in the year. If you're a player and you have a bad game or two, it's like, all right, things happen. Oh, wait, now I'm starting to figure things out. But if it gets to a point where South Carolina is not able to overcome it as a team, and that's not saying that Sellers will struggle on the road, but again, one of the unknowns. It's gonna be a tremendous opportunity for him. That's one game in particular that I'm really looking at. I think another game too, when we look at the schedule, there's going to be some tricky ones. You look at, LSU, you look at Ole Miss. I think more than anything, when you look at some of those home games, you're gonna have to find a way to be able to LSU, Ole Miss, Texas A&M. You're gonna have to find a way to at least win one of those games. You have to be able to find ways to win at home, and I know that'll probably piss people off when I say, "Oh, you got to find one way to at least win one of those games." Ole Miss is going to be a really good team this year. LSU is going to be a really good team this year. Texas A&M, for a team that is going through changes, I'm still never going to look at that and be like, "Oh yeah, that's got that in the bag." But what I do think is interesting when you talk about a team like Ole Miss, and certainly the Gamecocks will have plenty of added motivation heading into that game. I think what's interesting about that is the fact that you're coming off one of your two byes. Now, keep that in mind. South Carolina, just like teams throw college football this year because of the expansion to the college football playoff, they're going to have two byes this year. That first bye is going to come at the end of September, so right between that Akron and Ole Miss game. And then you have one the following week after Oklahoma before you play Texas A&M. So what we've seen from the Gamecocks in years past, some of those games where they come out after a bye, they're ready to go. They have different wrinkles, whether it be from an offensive standpoint, guys who are banged up, they're running around a hell of a lot faster. They're able to regroup. So when you look at it, I wouldn't be shocked just looking at LSU, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, that the Gamecocks will be underdogs in all three of those games. If you ask me today, now obviously things play out, things can change. But if you ask me right now, what's Vegas saying? I'm sure South Carolina is going to be underdogs in all three. But specifically looking at that Ole Miss and an A&M game, Joe, the fact that you're coming out of a bye, heading into those games at home,
massive.
Why not? Why not? So I know that doesn't give you a direct answer as far as, okay, what's the turning point outside the Kentucky game? But my whole thing that I'm going with is some of these games that you're going to be underdogs in, most likely, you have to find a way to win it. Shoot, never mind the fact that you got to play Missouri later in the year, who's coming off a very good season. And a lot of people are picking them to finish pretty high in the conference.
Yeah. No, Mike. I mean, it was Kentucky, Ole Miss, A&M. And then, I think that Oklahoma game could be a pretty good litmus test. Because if everything goes to projections, if you will, everyone's taking South Carolina's going to get boat raced in Tuscaloosa, and right now I have no reason to offer a rebuttal to that. But again, you're going to have to go play a little like Alabama, the standard of college football for the last 10 decade, whatever. And then you got to go on the road again to Oklahoma, Shane Beamer's former school, or that he was at. And there's storylines with all that, but that's another, big time program. It's a long road trip. So it'll be interesting to see, how that game goes. Out of the ones, obviously, that you didn't talk about, I think the Oklahoma game is going to be interesting. Missouri is going to give you a tough fight. The fact that that's in November, though, is super beneficial. What you got at that point. And again, hopefully you're not too banged up by that point of the year. But I think, Kentucky's really going to be the litmus test. There's no Georgia on the schedule anymore, which is kind of nice that, that litmus test is never really a fun one because, again, you're supposed to, I mean, you can compete with Georgia. We've seen that in previous years, beat them too. But yeah, I think having Kentucky as your litmus test is a little bit more suitable for your schedule. And then, I mean, your hard games, like you mentioned, Mike, are coming off that bye. So should be interesting to see. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see how it goes.
To kind of answer his question, Travis Edwards, he says, we don't look, and this is more of a comment, but I'm going to turn it into a question. He says, we don't look often at who our opponents play before and after us, and that matters. It does. It does, Travis. Yeah. So I took the liberty of just looking it up for you. The week before, South Carolina plays Ole Miss. Ole Miss will be playing Kentucky. The week before, A&M plays South Carolina. A&M will be playing LSU. So they got SEC opponents. Maybe they'll get banged up. I'm not saying, want to see anyone get hurt, but you know what I mean. Just the physical SEC game, you banged up, and then you have to go out there and play a South Carolina team who's coming off a bye. So we will see. Appreciate everyone that tuned in today. We're going to keep these things rolling all off season. Before you know it, SEC Media Days will be here. We'll have plenty to talk about over these next couple of weeks, as we've alluded to. Things are going to start to pick up from a recruiting standpoint. So be sure to keep it locked into Gamecock Central. Sign up today, just $1 for your first month. I mean, that's like going to, I don't know, I don't eat at McDonald's anymore or anything like that. So I don't know. Is that like adding a piece of cheese? You don't get a piece of cheese in your burger the next time you go. I was going to say you just don't get the McFlurry, but the ice cream machine's
always broken.
Yes, yeah. You're good. There you go. Save that money. Go sign up for GC. Father's Day is right around the corner. Perfect. Don't know what to get, Dad. Tired of getting him friggin' ties every year or something, the same thing. Perfect. Sign him up for GC. They'll love it. Can't beat that. He's Intern Joe. I'm Mike. You appreciate everyone that tuned in today. Thursday is going to be a little different. With baseball in the NCAA tournament, Intern Joe and Jack Veltri, they're going to be doing a baseball show on Thursday. So go in a little hiatus for football on Thursdays, but GC Live will continue with baseball talk. Again, appreciate everyone that tuned in today. We're less than 100 days away until South Carolina kicks off their season week 1 against Old Dominion. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your week.